identified, at least on the radar or with reports, why they would try to scramble aircraft to intercept them. It was a very aggressive, you might say, response from our own government. Then I was assigned to the Unified Pacific Command under Admiral Felt during the 60s, and I was the officer in charge of the alternate command post involved in nuclear weapon operation planning. And during this period of time, I also learned of a number of incidents which happened. A couple of nuclear weapons sent into space were destroyed by the extraterrestrials. Our government sent a nuclear weapon for explosion on the moon's surface. It was tended to, as I understand it, to assess some scientific data and reaction and so forth. The idea of any explosion in space by any Earth government was not acceptable to the extraterrestrials, and that has been demonstrated over and over. And then further on, I finally retired from the Air Force and joined the Boeing Company, where I was assigned to the Minuteman program, where I was responsible for the configuration accounting of all the nuclear fleet of Minuteman 1, 2, and 3. And during that period of time, I also learned about incidents involving nuclear weapons. For example, they actually photographed the UFO following the missile as it climbed into space and shining a beam on it, which neutralized the missile. And this was recorded. It was all hushed up. They split up the team that observed it, but of course eventually the news came out, and it was later published and confirmed it.
I was in charge of the communications center at 28th Air Division at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. I was, again, the top secret control officer there. I dispatched all the nuclear launch authenticator to the SAC missile crews and whatnot, so I had a very good top secret background to go on. One night, or one day I should say, I happened to see a message that came through my communications center. There again, I cannot quote the date, where it came from, where it was going to, but I do recall reading it and saying that basically that a UFO was seen near missile silo numbers, I can't recall, but it was hovering there, and it said that the crew going on duty and the crew coming off duty all saw the UFO just hovering in midair. It was a metallic circular object, and from what I understand, the missiles were all shut down. They were in the missile silos, and they were being, I don't know what SAC does as far as activating a missile is concerned, but it's basically on a standby mode, so it can be launched. But when they say it went down, it means they went dead. And something turned those missiles off, and so they could not be put in a mode of launching.
The event, the incident, I guess I call it, is happened on the morning of March 16th, 1967. As I recall, it was early in the morning, and I received a call from my topside security guard, and he said that he and some of the guards had been observing some strange lights flying around the site. It wasn't more than, well, within a few minutes, I'd say, maybe a half hour later. He calls back, and this time he's very frightened. I can tell by the tone of his voice, he's very shook up, and said, "Sir, there's a glowing red object hovering right outside the front gate." He said, "I'm looking at it right now. It's a glowing red object. I've got all the men out here with their weapons drawn." And of course, he was all shook up while he was telling me this. He was very excited. I immediately went over to my commander, who was taking a nap. We have a little cot down there in a rest period. And I was telling him about the telephone call we just received. And as I was relating this to him, our missiles started shutting down one by one. There were approximately anywhere from 6 to 8 that went down but they went down in rapid succession, which again is extremely rare. And in the meantime, I called upstairs to find out what the status was of this object. The guard said, well, the object has left. It just left at high speed. Echo Flight is another squadron, about, I'd say, 50, 60 miles away from our location. But they had the same sort of thing happen. They had UFOs that were hovering not the launch control facility, but the actual launch facilities where the missiles are actually located. They had some maintenance and security people out there at the time, and they were observed. The UFOs were observed by these people out at those sites. Now, they lost all 10 of their weapons. So that morning, we lost anywhere from, 16 to 18 ICBMs. At the same time, UFOs were in the area and were observed by airmen. This incident was of extreme concern to SAC headquarters because they couldn't explain it. Nobody could explain what happened. There is another incident that happened just within a week of this, a week after, where there were radar reports and quite a few more witnesses.
So we all turned around, and they're sitting about, I'd say, a half a mile from the tower, and at about 3,000 feet was 3 silver UFOs, sitting in a farm. Was 2 here, then 1 covering the center. Once they started moving, they went straight up, for a while, and then they went zap. And they was off our scope, and our scope would go out to 260 miles. And so that you calculate that, and that's pretty fast. I called headquarters, and the guy on the phone, he says, I said, okay, we got a contact. And he says, you mean SAC is running a mission against you? I said, not SAC. Not SAC. What then? I said, Cosmos. Wait a minute. He said, scramble your phone. So there's a switch you could throw that scrambles everything in my end. And I said, okay, my phone's scrambled. Yours scrambled, mine's scrambled. You taking pictures? Taking pictures. Taking radar pictures, taking radar pictures, taking real pictures. He says, okay, don't say another word. He says, I will send a courier up there. He'll get there in about 6 hours. You turn everything over to him. We are never officially ever noted for those pictures that they ever received those pictures. It was just went secret. It went black, like it never happened.
I was on mid-watch during my second med cruise, and it was about sometime between midnight and 2 o'clock, and I had a contact come on the radar scope. I knew the difference between surface search radar and air search radar. There's differences in polarity of the radio signal and things like this, and how the waves come back, all the stealth kind of stuff, active and passive electronic countermeasures. So I know the difference between a flock of geese, or wave returns, or false echoes. In fact, this was the first thing that challenged me to check it out in ECM as to whether or not the contact I had on the scope was genuine. Because this was between 65,000 feet and above, and the strength of the signal was as strong as a surface contact on the water of an aircraft carrier. This contact was huge. It was got my attention and the attention of others that were on watch. There were 4 enlisted on watch and 2 officers at the time. And so anyway, in this particular case, it was showing up on height-finding equipment, and it was showing up on radar equipment. And then it began to move fairly slowly at first, and then very quickly. The CO came in, and he wanted to know what the heck was going on here, and they looked at it and asked what the hell was that, you know, and it got the attention of the captain at that time. Was Captain Clark, was my captain. My commander was Commander Gibson at the time. And there was only one person on watch in ECM, and before I knew, in a matter of 15 minutes, the ship was being turned, and 2 Phantom IIs were being prepared for launch. The Phantom IIs went to afterburners, and they were about 100 miles or so away from this contact and turned on their conical scan radar to lock on, and it winked out. Just disappeared. After they land on the pipe, 35 minutes later, and everybody's settled down, this thing winks back on again, and it's about 12 to 15 miles from the ship, hovering at about 30,000 feet. And in any event, they went out, and the lookouts couldn't see anything. Nobody could see anything. But it was there on our radar scope. It was not a false signal. And my SEAL told me, Jordan, this, you know, what have you got in your log? This never happened. And I wasn't the only one there on watch that night. So anybody who was there at that time knows what I'm talking about and knows that it's the truth. But less than a dozen people knew what went on that night, and that ship had 5,000 men on it. There were documents that I have seen that refer to the Roosevelt having several instances of UFO flyovers, and particularly after they took on board nuclear weapons. And I was on board when they did take those on for the first time.
I was granted, after a 6-month wait, a top secret special compartmented intelligence clearance with a zebra stripe identification badge, which permitted access to all facilities on the base at all times. It's the highest level of alert that the Navy has or had at that time for dealing with generally dealing with global nuclear threats. When you set a condition zebra, whether it's a drill or not, people who are not authorized to be there who do not have a zebra access badge, it's a zebra stripe badge on your clearance badge, they have to leave the command facility, and we have Marines stationed outside the building there, in the building and as well as outside, that were under orders to shoot any unauthorized personnel that remained in the command center. They would announce it beforehand, this is a drill, set condition zebra. And unauthorized personnel would be escorted out of the command center if they didn't already know that they had to leave. But they turned the lights down this time, and they didn't say this is a drill. There's a door right here, and this guy, the Marine, comes in and wants to know what's going on. Is this a drill or so forth? They've got orders to start shooting people. And I know because I actually got the junior OOD's attention and said, hey, you guys need to tell this guy something. He's ready to start shooting people, because they haven't told him to stand down yet, and which he did. And I remember, wanting to just get the hell out of there. We had contact with an unidentified flying object that had entered our airspace. And at that point, when Admiral Train found out that it wasn't the Soviets, and that